So today we're going to have a quick look at the mobilisation confidence assessment. We will go over contract management processes, insurance and technical skills, contract variation management, KPIs and monthly reporting, managing complaints, and resources are at the end that have some other elements within the RISE network that you can tap into. So the mobilisation confidence assessment, if you haven't been through one yet, it's like the diagnostic that we would have done with you if you sought our assistance during the bid phase. So it's just even though it's an assessment, it is just actually a review of where you're up to, having a look over what we know the department are going to expect you to have in place, and ensuring that you're on track to pull all that information together for them so that they'll be confident that you're going into delivery with everything you need and your governance arrangements are all set up. It is not a pass-fail situation. It is just a green, amber, red assessment of your readiness to complete that task. Contract management, one of my favourite topics in the world, almost as fun as fraud. The contract management stages, they're really quite basic stages, so my apologies if this feels like a bit of sucking eggs. But essentially, you need to identify what you need to comply with. So the rules of the program for warm homes, and the rules that PAS 2035 and 2030, that Trustmark, that MCS, that all the standard typical building and construction rules that you need to follow as part of normal life, with your warm homes rules on top. Once you figure out, okay, this is the framework we need to operate within, these are the things that we want to do with it, so they identify what you want, do some soft market testing to sort of see what kind of contractors you can procure out there. You may go for a full turnkey solution. You may decide to manage the supply chain yourself. You might get a management agent in to help you manage your contract, but keeping in mind they're obviously a contractor as well, so you'll be needing to manage their contract at the very least. Then going through your procurement step, whether that's through a framework, whether it's a procurement alliance where it's a group of providers that have bandied together to have better buying power in the market. There are a few of those that exist around the country, so if that's something that you would like to tap into, by all means reach out to your delivery support manager, and they should be able to connect you with a procurement alliance that you might be able to join. The frameworks, typical framework would be something like Fusion 21, and then obviously there's, for smaller programs, there's usually an option to get 3 quotes and move from there, depending on the size of the project that you're doing. There are projects in this program stemming from 66 million right down to 250,000 for the grant funding amount. So there is a big variety of options of procurement. And again, if that's something that you would like some advice or some help with, we do have some procurement subject matter experts that can have a chat to you about options that you may want to look at. The contract management, really, it says here in the diagram that it starts with procurement, but really it starts before that. You can't put your contract together if you don't know what you need to comply with, what you want to deliver, and sort of getting an idea of what you might want to put into the tender and during your assessment and then negotiation of the contract. You need to have all that pre-work done so that you can understand, okay, this is what we need to include. Let's not forget about X, Y, and Z. So if you've got a management agent working for you, you need to make sure that they are having regular risk meetings. They are addressing fraud risk as well, that they're having regular governance meetings with you and with their suppliers that are doing the installations, that their reporting to you meets the needs that you have to report to the department. You need to make sure that the invoices that they're receiving and then putting through to you are actually HMRC compliant, that that, they're checking that people have got their Trustmark accreditation certificates or their MCS certificates or whatever their trade certificates are that they must have to be able to operate safely on site, that they've got all of that. Not just that they say, yeah, I've got one of those, but they've actually seen it, got the proof, can demonstrate that they've actually checked it. All of that needs to be included in the contract before you even get to the procuring stage. So you need to make sure that your tender document recognises all of the governance activities, as well as the delivery and the installations and everything else. DESNZ are very interested in how you do your contracts. So if you haven't got your GFA yet and you haven't got the criteria, a lot of people have got the criteria that they need to meet a subsequent condition of a contract strategy. And that's because they haven't provided in their initial application enough confidence to the department that they're actually looking at all of these extra elements of governance in the program. Moving on from that, areas and tools to consider. So your service level agreements. Do you want the contractor to tell you if there's a complaint? How are you going to manage the complaint process? Do you want issues to be resolved by a certain time frame? Is your contract, where it's got the early warning system established, have you included the early warning system in your contract so that you're covered for any risks that they may be seeing that they should be telling you as soon as they know, rather than holding off and hoping that it's going to be fixed? Do you want measures by the installer to be to a specific standard? So, you might get a particular extraction fan for your ventilation, but really it's a crappy little £5 extraction fan compared to something that's actually going to last more than a year. Is it worth just putting in a £5 fan when a £20 fan might last you longer and do a better job of your ventilation? So is there a specific standard that you want your installers to follow? Do you want to review the relationship if costs change? So if you're not buying under a framework and not buying under procurement alliance, then costs can vary in the market. They may find that they can't get whatever supplies they had thought they were going to get because everybody's doing the same work at the same time. So your costs go up. If you're buying under a framework, then your contract can state that it can't go higher than the framework, or that there can only be a certain boundary that it can go up by. You should consider listing that in your contract as well. Do you think there's something that should happen if either party can't deliver on the promised homes, or they're not going to be able to complete in time? What parameters do you want to put into your contract to say, well, if there's a failure, what are the steps that you're going to include? Your contract can be as diverse and detailed as you want it to be. The question is trying to find that sweet spot between not constraining them too much so that you're getting, innovative solutions to the problems. The problems being, finding the right measure and then getting the measure into different houses that, while they might be the same archetype, the people inside are not the same people. So they're going to need different deliveries and different small level solution work on the ground. So trying not to restrict them, but by the same token, making sure that your organisation is safe from failure and your supply chain are safe from not being able to deliver, so that you've got lots of checks in place to be able to support them to be able to deliver. The warm home parties that are involved with contracts that inevitably you'll need to flag, and you'll need to have different contracts with different people all over the place. So obviously you're going to have a grant funding agreement with DESNZ. Within that, there is a data sharing agreement, and that data sharing agreement can be used then with your installers, because obviously they're going to be working directly with the residents, or in the same space as the residents potentially, and there may be information that you need to disclose to your installer to ensure that resident is suitably cared for during installation and suitably considered for their own personal needs when looking at the solutions for measures. There'll be, if you're in a consortium, there'll be an agreement between the consortium lead and the consortium members. There may be, if it's a net zero consortium, then there'll be agreement with the net zero hub, who typically not a delivery organisation. If it's any other consortium, then the lead in the consortium will typically be a provider that has the largest numbers, or the provider who has the most available resources to do the administrative management of a consortium. Doesn't have to be the biggest provider. So there'll be agreements there. There'll be agreements with subcontractors, installers, management agents, little bits and pieces that will be different for each one. So getting your contract suite of documents set up early is a great thing to do. So when I say early, before your procurement activities. So then when you're going through your procurement and doing your assessment on, well, we want this supplier for this reason, you can back up your reasoning by saying this is what we're including in the contract, and this is the direction we want our project to go, and so for this reason we've selected this contractor. It doesn't always have to be the cheapest installer or management agent. It needs to be the best fit for what your project needs to deliver. Moving on, key contract considerations for warm homes. You've got your PAS 2025 and 2023. I think that's supposed to be 2035, 2023, and PAS 2030. Your Trustmark and MCS requirements, your procurement regulations, depending on what procurement power you have. If you're in LA, it's going to be different to a private organisation, which is going to be different to a charity. We do have charities in this wave that are delivering. Some of them are only delivering 12 houses over the 3 years. Some of them are delivering 20 houses over the 3 years. I think they're brilliant, and my hat's taken off to them for the effort that they have to put in for such a small amount of homes. The effort is the same as everyone else. So £66 million program or 250K program, it's the same level of administration at the moment. So getting their heads around PAS 2035, PAS 2030, the British Standards Institute is the best source for getting those pieces of information, but knowing procurement regulations, the cost caps, understanding Trustmark and MCS and how they work, it's a pretty big administrative step. So hats off to everyone doing the program, because it's a lot to take on. Service level agreements or contract. So this will set out the expectations between the customer and the supplier of some sort. It's a contractual set of expectations with legal force. So your SLAs are not just, a nice to have, we want to achieve this or we want you to achieve this. It's actually something that they can be held to account for and legally prosecuted for, failure to meet signed contract agreements, which then will come with penalties of, you owe X, Y, Z and compensation. Where you might have a collaborative working agreement or MOU with a strategic partner, other local authorities, housing associations, community organisations, you will have an SLA or a contract with a management agent or a delivery partner on your retrofit project. So it will feel similar to an MOU, but at the end of the day, it's called an SLA so that you can actually hold people to task for not delivering. An SLA will set out clear and specific deliverables, timelines and quality standards for each phase of the project. This ensures that both parties have mutual understanding of expectations. You'll have performance metrics and benchmarks to ensure the contractor's performance. This can include energy efficiency targets, completion times, and adherence to the budget. So part of your compliance will be, especially if you buy under a framework, that they're not actually charging you more than states in the framework or in the alliance, the procurement alliance agreed costs. It has happened that some contractors have, because it's new for them as well, have forgotten that they're under an agreed costing basis, and charged the extra that they got charged, so passed on the charges. And they can't do that when it's stated in a contract that the cost will be X, Y, Z. If they don't adhere to it, then they're busting the budget and they need to revise their invoices. So make sure you check the invoices that they aren't charging you more than what they're supposed to charge. Risk management, potential risks, and the outline of the mitigation strategies. I say outline because you can't really know a risk until it's realised. Even familiar risks that we've all seen before can have a different element to it. So outlining the risk mitigation strategies is the best that we can hope for. But reviewing your risks and making sure that you're tracking them, that you're aware of whether there is an increased likelihood as the project goes along for something to happen because of other elements, activities, actions that have happened during your program, including plans for delays if something happens. So if there was an element of your delivery that happens over winter and it's internal elements, you might sort of think, well, that will be okay because it's internal activities that we're doing during the winter months, so there won't be any problems. But you can always have, a major storm come through that knocks out power for a week. What would you do in that situation? So flagging that in your risk register and sort of going, okay, if that happens, we are doing internal activities, but we need, maybe a week's buffer until power could get restored. Have we factored that into our timeline? Can we have a week's slippage? Yeah, we should be okay with that. Being aware of it, being prepared to mobilize your team in a way to respond to that. There are considerations that you need to have there. It could even be that roads are blocked or flooded or whatever else, but having those recognized and monitored throughout the seasons is an important thing to consider. Cost overruns, unforeseen circumstances, all sorts of stuff like that. So, if there's a delay because of a weather factor, you might get some cost overruns. Have you built enough contingency into your project to ensure that you can absorb those cost overruns if they happen? Payment terms in your contract, it's important to have milestones and conditions for payment releases. So ensuring that they're not just going to get paid because they said they've delivered something, that there's evidence, they've provided compliant invoicing, that it might be they get paid on 50% of the allocated properties to that subcontractor or contractor are completed. So, but the department will only pay on 100% completion. So, for your contribution to the funding of the program, your co-funding, can that cover enough of milestones that you could set up several little goals for them to ensure that they're tracking towards a timely delivery for you? Milestones are something that can really help you incentivize your contractors to complete work with sort of managed time frame along the way. That'll help you maintain your cash flow. It'll ensure payments are tied to project progress and, as I said, incentivize them to keep on rolling. Warranty and maintenance, the warranty periods and the maintenance responsibilities after each measure is installed. I'll get onto resident engagement type activities in a minute, but the warranty on, say, again, ventilation, a fan, extractor fan that you might have installed as part of this process. If it's a £5 ventilation device, then the maintenance, the warranty on it might only be like 6 or 12 months, where if it's a £20 one, you might get a three-year warranty or something like that. I know that's a little bit simple explanation and nowhere near what these things actually would cost or the warranty periods would be, but hopefully you understand what I'm trying to say there. Who's responsible for the maintenance on it? Making sure that that's recorded on your systems. And if it is the installer, then you need to make sure that you've got provisions in place in your contract that that installer can come back and do whatever servicing they need to do in the future years beyond this program. Dispute resolution needs to be identified in any contract. A clear process for resolving disputes, including mediation and arbitration procedures. You don't want your project to get derailed because there's a legal battle with your suppliers including installers, subcontractors. Any sort of escalation of disputes should be identified on how it will happen as an element of your contract, and what the time periods are for turning around and actioning those escalations, and who would be responsible for mediation and arbitration. So whether that is something that needs to be done externally once it reaches a certain point, that needs to be flagged early on. Hopefully it's something that no one ever has to face on warm homes, but I have no doubt that someone somewhere will have an awful day and may need to fall back on their dispute resolution procedures. Last but not least at all is compliance reporting. So compliance reporting with regulations and standards, including clauses for regular reporting, documentation that needs to be tracked, compliance and project progress, making sure that you're on track to have all of the documentation that you need for Trustmark accreditation at the end of each home delivery. So for each home that then has to be put through the Trustmark accreditation, that the EPC certification has been completed and updated and registered, is the final, that's where you complete the house, as opposed to the works being finished. That's not completion yet, because there's this mandatory regulatory activities that need to happen. The element that I mentioned before about resident engagement, there is a requirement under PAS for a 6-month review and a 12-month review with the resident on the measures installed. Even if you're not doing the Warm Homes program, that's a requirement under PAS for anything that gets installed. So making sure that the 6-month and 12-month follow-ups are on your project schedule and identified as maintenance activities post-delivery or post-project. Some of them in your houses that are delivered in your first and second year, they'll get their 6 and 12-month checkups during your second and third year of the programs. So making sure that you've got that factored in to your contract, as well as to your project schedule, is a really, it sounds silly that you need to include that in your contract or in your schedule, but a lot of people are forgetting it at the moment, or they're not familiar with PAS 2030 and PAS 2035 enough to be aware that you need to do that 6 and 12-month follow-up with residents. It is good to get your regular maintenance team involved and engaged in the program, so that they can be doing these activities as BAU after the project is finished. However, it may be that you sign a contract with your subcontractor to say that 6 and 12 months after the scheme has finished, they will still follow through and do that resident engagement work, so that they're still on the hook to deliver it if you don't have internal maintenance people that can do that for you. Right, management approaches, formal tools, so service level agreements, penalties, escalation policies, complaints procedures, and mid-contract / annual reviews. Mid-contract is not just halfway through the contract. It could be a third of the way through each year. It could be done quarterly. Mid-contract is whatever you choose it to be. If you're only doing annual reviews of your contract with the contractor, that's okay, but you are leaving yourself open to things not quite a circle piece fitting into an oval hole kind of thing, where it's almost the right shape, but it could be better. You're missing opportunities for lessons learned on the job and improving the delivery of your program on the job. So quite often organisations will start delivery. It'd be nice if we could start delivery in April, but we'll start delivery in of maintenance works or retrofit works in sort of May, June, July. Hopefully finish it off before the winter months, and then over the winter months sort of stand down the team and start again in sort of February, March, April the following year, as the February winter period kind of ends. Hopefully ends early so we can get a good summer. So during that quiet period over the winter months, you can be using that to do lessons learned and reviewing your contract before the end of the contract period. But you can also do it after the first couple of months, so that you're reviewing everything that's happening in the delivery and making sure that the contract is set up the way that it needs to be. If not, you can do contract variations and negotiate that with your suppliers. Other tools, meetings, regular updates on the KPIs, trackers, and as I mentioned, the lesson learned sessions, which can be mid-contract, annual, whatever you want it to be. Trackers, something that I would personally highly recommend from a project management perspective. Even if you're using a management agency or a turnkey solution, I would be running my own tracker in the background against the schedule and physically ticking off things on the schedule to say, right, these are done, this is done. We've gone over our costs here, we've gone under our costs there. They kind of balance each other out, so we're on track with our budget. Work breakdown, cost breakdown, and budget breakdown schedules are really handy things for anyone managing a contract to have, so that you can keep track of the project and know whether you're on track, for want of a better way to say that, for blowing out either your budget, your time, or your quality. Insurance and technical skills. This is a contentious subject because it all depends on your insurance and indemnity policies, but making sure that your subcontractors, contractors, management agents, turnkey solutions have their public liability insurance and professional indemnity insurance. It's not just asking them, have they got it? It's the compliance side of it and making sure that they've actually got it. Get them to show you that they've got whatever letter to confirm what their insurance policies are and what the cover level is. I can't stress that enough. A friend of mine bought a house. The person that did the inspection for the house had insurance as an engineer, had insurance to cover the inspection. However, hadn't paid his policy in the month that he did the inspection on their house. It was riddled with termites. He missed it, and they had to knock down and rebuild, all because he hadn't paid his public liability insurance and professional indemnity insurance. Hard thing for my friends, but when it comes to doing social housing and looking at a lot of homes, you don't want to get caught out with something as simple as that from a lack of insurance coverage by your contractors. So knowing whether they pay their insurances monthly or annually, it sounds like a really simple question, but it's a really important thing to know, because then you can assess your level of risk of anything going pear-shaped. Technical skills, PAS 2035-23 and PAS 2030, the technical requirements that we're operating under in warm homes. Also, Trustmark and MCS are the key technical requirements. There is a difference between PAS 2035, 2019 and 2023 that some people are worried about at the moment, which is the tightness testing on properties, so air tightness testing. It is a strategy that needs to be identified. It is not a requirement to do air tightness testing. So it's to develop an air tightness strategy, not necessarily completing the air tightness testing right now. That obviously costs a chunk of money that you may not have recognised in your bid. And so if it came as a shock to a few people that didn't realise that that was part of the new requirements. It's not the testing, it is a testing strategy. In the same way that PAS 2030 and 2035 require you to have, so the activities that you're doing now under this program are the short-term management plan for the property. You need a medium-term and a long-term plan for the property as well as part of your PAS requirements to demonstrate, this is additional activities that we're going to do down the track, or, you're getting them up to EPCC now, but do they need a new boiler down the track? They don't need it right now, but it needs to be replaced. And when you're replacing that, can it go off gas? Can you, put in an air source heat pump down the track or something along those lines? Elements that you're not doing now that you will do in the future, you need to have that medium and long-term plan for the property as well. Moving on, contract variation management. These are one of the most funnest things in the world. Spotting any changes early is really, really advantageous. It's not always going to happen. Things can happen out of your control that can result in a need for change to a contract. It could be the number of homes could change, or the costs could change because of a whole variety of reasons. It can be, these elements can be managed by spotting the change early. So the sooner the change is identified, the earlier the request can be made to change contract needs. So it may just be a contract change with your delivery team, so your suppliers, your management agent, your turnkey, whoever it happens to be. But it may also be a contract change that you need to put through to the department. So for whatever reason, you can no longer deliver on the volume of houses you had originally submitted in your bid. So you need to put in a project change request to the department to change the scope of your project to meet different needs. At the moment, they have those project change request reviews monthly, and it can take a long time to get the change request approved. So the earlier you can identify a potential change and action it, the better. If you are looking at a change that might need to happen, it's better to anticipate that change happening and get it moving than it is to hold out to see if maybe it won't be needed. Holding out to see if it won't be needed is likely to end up in disaster and pain for you down the track when you can't get your project change requests approved by the department and you need to find a way to deliver. The change request procedure, as I just mentioned, agreeing it with your contractors before the contractors sign. So this is the procedure we're going to take to do a change request. Needs to be communicated to them early on and generally recorded in the contract as this is a process we'll be taking. In the same sort of way, this is the process for escalation of issues or disputes. You'll have an escalation for contract change. Evaluating the need for the change may involve engagement with the department. It may involve engagement with RISE as your source of information goes. You might come back to us and say, I don't understand this bit of the policy. Can you help me with this? And someone from RISE will respond to you and say, yep, you can do this, and speak to your delivery support manager. They will facilitate XYZ with the department for you, and you can go through a change process, or you don't need to submit a change process for that change. It's not a mandatory requirement or something like that. So there are elements that you'll need to evaluate to see what level of change you may need to put in, whether you need to do contract variations up and down the line. So up being to the department, down being to your contractors. Communication, so being transparent and ensuring clear communications to avoid future contract variations. It's good to have a strong and regular communication with your suppliers so that you can, again, spot changes early, but also potentially find ways to work around it without needing to do a change. This by that I don't mean like you've spotted something and to cover it up you're going to do something else. That's not what we're looking for. It's more a case of spotting it early. Can this be mitigated? Can we, potentially swap around the order of installation? Can your contractors be flexible with their time and do a different order of delivery, thereby, still doing what they needed to do just on a different date? That may not involve a contract variation. It may involve one because they may say, well, I can do that, but I'm going to have to get someone else in to help. So that's going to cost you a bit more money. That then would be a contract variation. So finding ways around things like that to not increase costs, but to be able to facilitate works happening so that something isn't missed out as a result of a change that has happened. Someone has a car accident and can't work for a couple of weeks. Who are you going to get into to backfill? There's no one available. So can we do another body of work first? That kind of activity. Implementation, that's just action and implement agreed changes. So having those conversations and rolling the changes out. If you have to do the contract variation, doing the contract variation, getting it signed off and approved. What do we mean by contract variations? I think I've just gone through some examples to explain that, but it might be to the measures, it might be the number of homes, it might be timescales. And as I mentioned, you might need to contract vary up or contract vary down. Contract vary up to the department, down to the suppliers. Not that suppliers are beneath this, they totally are not. It's just looking at it on an organisational structure. KPI and monthly reporting, as we mentioned before, tracking activities, tracking milestones, tracking budget spend, keeping your key elements as an element that you're aware of, that at any time during the program, if the department said to you, where's your budget at? Is it going okay? You can turn around and say, yep, this is what we've been doing. Our KPIs are X, Y, and Z. And we have monthly meetings to track our expenditure, or we have fortnightly meetings to track our delivery schedule to make sure things are happening on time. We're reviewing our risks. We're ensuring compliance activities are happening to reduce fraud and error. It is, as I mentioned before, it has happened on Wave 2.1 where suppliers have not realised that they've been engaged on framework as subcontractors and they've charged more than what they should be charging. They haven't done it deliberately. It's been an error, but the way to reduce that is making sure that you've checked your accreditations, you've had discussions with the contractors, or your management agent has had conversations with your contractors to make sure that they understand this is what the framework is, this is what you will be able to charge. Your invoices need to have HMRC compliant details on it, such as the Trustmark accreditation or whatever other certification they need to meet for their invoicing. That they need to provide evidence, usually photographic evidence is the best way to do it, but that someone's actually checking that evidence. There's been photographs put in of doors that have been replaced and just been replaced with the same door, or high retention storage heaters, 3 have been charged for, but when you look between the photographs, only 1 has been replaced and the 3rd one hasn't been installed. There was 2 originally, so that was a little bit interesting. It's the risk, frauds and error you could go on forever and a day trying to stay on top of, but simple quick checks will help you get on top of that, and having them in your registers, so your fraud register and your risk register, they kind of overlap. All your fraud risks should be recorded in your risk register so that you can track them and keep on top of them throughout the project. Managing complaints. We briefly went over this before. Ensuring that there are clear expectations for delivery between you and your delivery team are really important. Even if that is a turnkey solution, even if it is a management agent that is looking after it for you, ensuring that there is a clear understanding between you and your delivery team of what you expect from them, should reduce the likelihood of any complaints or escalation occurring. Complaints and escalations may come up as a result from the way they interact with residents. Sometimes it is just a quirk of the resident that they've misunderstood what's happening and they're not happy about it. Or it may be a situation where a subcontractor is just behaving as they would normally behave and don't realize that they're having a impact on the resident, and the resident's not okay with the way that they're behaving around their home. It can be uncomfortable conversations. It can be a whole raft of things. Making sure that you're safeguarding residents as well as safeguarding the people who are on site is a really important thing, and having those clear expectations set with them for behaviours. Again, it sounds like a no-brainer thing that all adults should be capable of doing, but someone might be having an off day and just not realise that they're swearing so much and that that's upsetting someone else. It happens, and ensuring that you've got the right procedures in place will make the process a lot easier to manage, and ensuring that the delivery team understand those procedures as well is an important thing. We're almost there. We've got 3 minutes. Customer complaints policy, as I was just saying, whatever the customer says is always correct. That's what they say in retail, isn't it? However, it's not necessarily the customer's fault. It's not necessarily the delivery team's fault. You need to get to the bottom of it. You need to have a resolution process. Your resident liaison team, whether they're internal or external, should have regular contact with the residents before, during, and after, the installation process, to ensure that there's nothing unexpected and to ensure that they're comfortable with everything that's being delivered. Can't express that enough as to how important that resident liaison team is for RLO, TLO, CLO, so tenant liaison or client liaison, customer liaison team, whatever team it is that you have, making sure that they're very heavily engaged with your residents, that the resident can feel comfortable that they can call them on their work phone and sort of say, right, I'm not happy with this, or can you please explain that? Close relationships will help the program be more successful. The complaints policy, again, making sure that everybody understands it. It should refer to the Legal Services Act 2007 training, and building this into your strategy is training people in it and building it into your strategy for delivery is really important. Throughout the process, being transparent with the customer and choosing language really carefully so that you're not putting anyone under the bus, including yourself. You don't want to say, I promise I'll look into this for you, and then find that it's something you can't look into. It's, when you're listening to someone who's upset, it's easy to make promises that potentially you can't hold up. And so making sure that you've got the right language around what you need to say is a simple but hard thing at the same time. There is, on the Legal Ombudsman website for legal service providers, there's some learning resources there on good complaints handling best practice. So if you search best practice complaint handling, you should be able to find that very easily on the internet. I will make sure it's on the resources at the end of the slides as well, so that when you get the slide deck sent out to you, that link is there. Complaint managing tips, again, that reference that I just mentioned now from the Legal Ombudsman, that will give you a whole bunch of tips that you can put into play and skill up your whole project team to have that knowledge and experience behind them so that they're not caught out. resources. You can reach out to us at any time to ask questions or to get some help on training that you might need for new people. You might want something specific for them on resident engagement. You might want something specific for them on, it may be an admin person that you're engaging to help manage the contract. There is a lot of resource there that you can use, and I will make sure that this also has that link to the Legal Ombudsman.